Hello and welcome to Wild Woman. My name is Mary and I am on a journey of spiritual and creative recovery. So I hope you follow along, hit subscribe, and I hope you enjoy this video. Last week I talked about spiritual practices, prayer, and meditation. And so this week I'm going to continue spiritual practices talking about fasting. So that's a really interesting subject to me, and it's something that I've struggled with for a really long time. And I think mostly because it's really difficult to understand what spiritual fasting is. So some of us may have fasted in the past for, like, if you were doing a medical procedure, you might have fasted for 24 hours prior to a surgery or procedure. Or you may have done some sort of fast in order to lose weight, or you might have done like a juice fast or something like that, or a cleanse. But as a spiritual practice, it's a little bit different. So it's really difficult to describe, and a lot of books have been written about fasting. But I'm just going to share with you my personal experience, and so kind of let you know how my fasting is going right now. I started fasting for Lent, which starts on Ash Wednesday and runs all the way to Easter. So it's about 6 weeks. It's 40 days, not counting Sundays. So Sundays are kind of thought of as a day off. Most of I'm about 3 weeks into the 6 weeks now at this point. And so basically, I've spent a lot of time just sort of being hangry and having headaches and not feeling great. But let's talk about the positives of fasting. At the beginning of this year, I set out with this goal in mind that I was going to become more of a spiritual person, more spiritually aware, more spiritually connected. And so it's really hard to set goals, so to speak. I mean, it's really hard to define what spirituality means, or to become more spiritual. So to really identify what that is, what that means. So I decided that I was going to set off with a list of spiritual practices that I was going to practice over this coming year. And one of those that I decided at the beginning of this calendar year, and we're currently in March, was that I was going to do a fast for Lent. And so I read several books and I did some thinking about it and how exactly I wanted to do that. And I would suggest to you to do some research, read some books. And I'm decided when I make this video that I was not going to tell you about the specifics of my particular diet over the next 6 weeks, because obviously it's not a total fast. You can't go 6 weeks without eating anything. But you definitely need to check into different options and check with your doctor to make sure that you're physically prepared and capable of some kind of sustained level of fasting. And so I started this fast on Ash Wednesday. And the reason why I decided to do this, there have been a lot of interesting things that I've noticed. So I'll first talk about hunger, which is a really interesting thing to talk about, things to think about. So I grew up middle class. Never had to worry about where my next meal was going to come from. Never have to worry about whether or not there's food in the refrigerator. And, when I was a kid, there was always cereal and milk for breakfast. There was always food, snacks in the refrigerator. And I think I pretty much survived the 80s with a lot of Kool-Aid. So there was always something at home to eat. There was always snacks, there was always food, always dinner. And so as a middle-class American, I've never really truly experienced hunger. And I think a lot of us maybe sometimes have a little sensation of hunger, and we're easily go to the kitchen and grab something to eat to satisfy that hunger. But it's not that easy for everybody. So using a fast as a time to recognize what that might feel like for other people. The difficulty of concentrating when you're hungry is really a big issue, and why a lot of schools have started implementing free breakfasts and free lunches for their students, because it is really, I found it very difficult to just concentrate and focus when I'm feeling hungry. But what I've also noticed about hunger is that it kind of comes and goes. I'll feel hungry and I'll just sort of deny and suppress that hunger a little bit for a while, and then it just kind of goes away. And that may not be the way it is for everybody. If you're in poverty, that sustained level of hunger over time becomes more and more difficult to ignore because it just grows and grows and grows bigger. And I have noticed, going to bed hungry, I just feel exhausted and tired, and it's just that much more difficult to just kind of lay there and be hungry and not really do anything about it. So that's been an interesting experience to think about. The other thing that has become interesting is that this fast, for me, when I set out the beginning of this year to become a more spiritual person, fasting I thought would be a kind of a way to reset my body and my mind and my spirit, to deny some of those physical cravings, to deny the pleasure of foods, particularly foods that I like, would be a way of resetting my mind and my body for more spiritual awareness and awakening. So 3 weeks into fasting, and I'm starting to sense that, but mostly I'm just kind of grumpy. So I'm not sure if that's really working or not. So I may do a follow-up video on this just to kind of let you know after 6 weeks if I'm feeling more spiritual after having given up certain things. And obviously I'm not on a total fast because like I said, you can't go 6 weeks without eating anything, but I have been very limited diet, eating very basic, simple foods, just trying to keep my diet to very, very tasteless, bland. I've been eating like crackers and pretzels, which are kind of just dry, bland foods. And so it's just been kind of difficult that I haven't really enjoyed eating anything for several weeks. Even on my days off on Sunday, I almost don't want to eat a whole lot, because when you're fasting, you eat a whole bunch and your stomach expands, and then you get even more hungry. So every time I eat, it almost kind of offsets the progress that I've made so far. So even on my days on Sundays, when I allow myself to eat a little bit more than I have been throughout the week, I try to limit that because it just kind of sets the whole process back. So I've been really conscious about every little thing that I eat. And then after not eating certain types of foods for a while, returning to that food does kind of give me a little bit of a tummy ache. So it's really been kind of a struggle to figure out exactly how to work through this over a sustained period of time. The other thing is that it kind of harkens back to that time in the Bible when the Israelites had left Egypt and they're wandering in the desert for 40 years, and they were living off of manna. Manna literally translates as, what is it? So we don't really know what manna is, but it's described as sort of a white, flaky substance that would appear in the desert once a day, except on the Sabbath day. So each day they would go out and gather just enough food for that day. And on the day before the Sabbath, they would gather enough for 2 days so that they wouldn't have to gather on the Sabbath. So kind of subsistence living, just sort of living on just enough to get through the day or just enough to get to the next day, has been a real challenge. And just kind of thinking through that process of what that must have been like for those people who had just enough for that one day, just barely enough to get you through one more day. So that's been an interesting thought process. And it really has been not thinking about food, or trying not to think about food, not thinking about what am I going to prepare for dinner tonight, what am I going to have for lunch today, has really changed the way I construct my day. Just one less thing really to think about. And not spending money. So I've been, I had the habit for a long time of eating fast food on my lunch break when I'm at work. And so not having to worry about that, not having to rush out, grab something fast and eat it really, really quickly, and then getting a stomach ache and not feeling well for the rest of the day because I ate this really junky fast food meal very quickly, and I was trying to hurry because I'm on my lunch break. Just didn't, my lunch break didn't seem very restful, and it was just sort of a rushed process to try to get through it and just try to eat something quickly. So it's really changed my mindset on how I approach my lunch break at work. So there have been some positives. So fasting is something that is not particular to the Christian faith or to any faith belief, just as any of the spiritual practices are not particular to any one belief or faith system. It's not something that everybody can do. Again, you have to be physically well to be able to do that. So it's something you want to check with your doctor. But it is definitely a spiritual practice that I think a lot of people might actually benefit from. So I'd had attempted to fast in years past, and by this time, usually I would have failed at fasting. And I can't say that I haven't had days where I broke down and ate something a little sweet. I'm like, I just need a little sugar, just a little piece of candy, just a little sugar, just something sweet. So I have had a couple of breakdowns, but for the most part, it's actually going pretty well. And I think the difference between this year and previous years, I think previous years, I just fasted because I was like, oh, well, it's Lent. That's something that you're supposed to do during Lent, and I didn't really put a lot of thought into it or put a lot of intention into thinking about why I was fasting or what the process actually is. So the difference for me this year is that it was something that I had been thinking about really since the beginning of the year. I had planned on doing the fast ahead of time. I did some research on it, and I really had this intention going into it that I was going to develop spiritually from this. And so I've really been trying to think and focus on the spiritual aspect of fasting and what it means, and thinking about how this feeling of hunger is affecting me, and really thinking about the ways that this can make me more social justice conscious, more spiritually conscious, and just thinking about all the different aspects of hunger and how that makes me feel, and thinking about all the different aspects of just living one day to the next on just what you need, just your necessities, bare absolute necessities, not eating any extras, not eating any extra sweets or desserts, not eating rich foods. It really has changed my perspective on food and eating and hunger. And I think a lot of times, particularly Americans, I think we tend to emotionally eat. We're not truly physically hungry. We're bored, or we're upset, or some other reason why we're eating other than actual physical need. So that's really been a turning point, an eye-opener for me. So that's how it's going so far with my fast. I'm finding it to be interesting. I'm finding it to be challenging, and yet I am feeling like I'm getting something out of it. So I'm not sure. It's hard to concentrate, and it's just kind of a different feeling. So it's been interesting. So thanks for watching my video. I think that's all I have for you today, because I am kind of tired and a little grumpy and a little hangry. So that's it. I invite you to, if you've ever done a fast before, how did that go for you? What were your thoughts? What your feelings? And if you've failed at fasting, do you have thoughts on maybe why you have failed in the past? Or if you're thinking about fasting, you don't necessarily have to fast during Lent, although according to the Christian tradition, that's when it would happen. If you don't happen to be of the Christian faith, you could really fast at any time. Even if you are in the Christian faith, you could fast at any time for various different reasons. So I'd be interested to hear from you exactly how that's going for you, if you are fasting or if you have fasted in the past. And as always, make sure you hit like. And if you want to hear more about my spiritual practices and what's going on in my life and in my creative life, I hope that you subscribe to get more videos. I do videos about every week and adding content to my blog pretty regularly. So I hope you also follow me on my blog. So thanks for watching. Have a great week. See you next week.